Hello and welcome to the latest IT Heroes podcast from Pathway. My name is Andy Ellwood, and I will be your new host going forward for these podcasts. And I'm joined by my colleague Giri. Hi, Giri.
Hi, Andy.
Good. And today we are going to talk about the topical as we record around the 24th of March. The topical subject of cyber warfare. So do you want to kick us off, Giri?
I think the cyber warfare has been there for a long time now. I don't think it's just from the start of March 24th. So right since when there is computers and internet's coming around, it has been there right from that. The digital era has both the boons and the banes of it. So we are here facing the negative parts of the digital transformation, and the cyber attacks are one of those key things in the internet today. And I think it began in 2007 when the Estonia faced this bronze soldier thing when hackers and the state-sponsored hackers took over, the Estonia's government's websites, their servers, and also made them go offline for quite a while. So I think the cyber warfare began right from there.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting about this case is that, we saw attacks against Ukraine, way back, good few years back to about 2014, I believe. But we also had in the lead up, in February, we got attacks against the Ministry of Health and other places. But there is I guess the jury's out at the moment on whether there's likely to be more cyber attacks against Ukraine, because the whole idea of cyber attack, people say, well, the thing about cyber attacks is it means you can reduce, casualties and damage because it's you're not physically attacking people. But both things have happened. So I read one expert saying that there's probably not much scope for Russia to launch attacks, for example, against Ukraine at the moment, because they're already in there. They're already doing the damage, which is what cyber attacks can do. But what's interesting is that Joe Biden has he's come out quite strongly at a meeting of CEOs in America to say, I have it written down here, it is your patriotic duty, a patriotic obligation to harden your systems against potential attacks. So they've got evidence and intelligence that Russia might be, planning attacks against the US, and they, and Biden has said that Russia's cyber capacity is fairly consequential, and it's coming. But they're also, they're also feeling frustrated. There's one of his cybersecurity experts has said that there are still critical infrastructure providers in the US that are ignoring the recommendations and the alerts from the federal agencies to fix known vulnerabilities, and they have been attacked.
It is happening, and I think that's a daily story where US organizations are getting hit by Russian ransomware operators. So that's like a mundane story happening out there.
Exactly, but it's interesting that it's now become, in the way that, way back at the time of the Second World War, it was your patriotic duty to kind of take up arms. Now it's your patriotic duty to ensure you have decent security protocols in place on your IT network. So it has actually shifted that, which is interesting. But it is, as you say, cyber attacks have been around, and people are attacking other state actors, performing cyber attacks for whatever reason. Sometimes it can be, siphoning money. There was that famous attack on the Bank of Bangladesh, the National Bank of Bangladesh, that tried to siphon $1 billion, which is basically all of their overseas holdings, into an account. I think we've got most of that back now. So it is really, to a large extent, more of the same, as we've already been seeing for several years, unfortunately. But there is maybe a kind of a slightly different edge when it's warfare, when it's cyber warfare, because it is not just doing, it's obviously doing damage, and it might be trying to earn money out of it, but it's actually doing it with a kind of a slightly bigger purpose. And I think that's the big difference. With normal criminal attacks, it's just a criminal attack. But now there are criminal attacks which have all the damage that criminal attack will have, but there's also therefore a larger, slightly more kind of
those things. They target to destabilize the targeted country or targeted government, and either they destabilize it or they go on to sabotage the entire data, or they go ahead and steal the data from the networks and use it for the other purposes. The main motive will be like a political agenda when we go for the cyber warfare name out there. So it is going to be political first, then it's going to be motivating the people out there. The state-sponsored hackers could be going for the money as a second priority. The first primary thing will be the political thing, because the Chinese and Russian state-sponsored hackers are targeting US. There is a stats on data plot that says like 26.4% of attacks on cyber warfare are targeted towards the US organizations, and out of those attacks on cyber on the organizations, 35% are coming from China and Russia.
Yeah, and there's also North Korea. In there. I think
Lazarus is the hackers from the North Korea. Lazarus is the group, and I think the recent hack on the Microsoft and Okta. There's a recent update I saw. Like that is a 16-year-old hacker from US actually doing that on the Microsoft and Okta. The recent page that happened. I'm not sure how genuine the news is. I just read it about a few hours ago.
Yeah, but again, when it's in a kind of a more global military context, what is something that I read, which is and I read a couple of things which give you pause for thought. On one hand, as I said earlier, cyber attacks are supposed to be a clean form of warfare that doesn't necessarily harm people. But something that's quite chilling is that that cyber attacks are a means for them to exact costs without crossing a major red line. So you can actually still do damage without doing you could argue there, Russia, for example, has crossed several red lines in the last month, but it allows you to do damage without damage to yourself, particularly because it's a few hackers in an office somewhere, maybe in a dormitory. I hear it certainly in North Korea, they kind of keep them in special dormitories, and because they're special people, because only 400 people in North Korea have access to the internet. So
that's a whole new world out there.
Yeah, so so you're trained there. But then I heard the other day I was listening to an expert on cyber warfare and cyber attacks, and I thought what was interesting. There are the way that she described it, there are three types of cyber attack. There's one that's just a sabotage, and that's to infiltrate, to try and find out about information, or to destroy it. And actually, the White House is saying that there hasn't been any major cyber attack, but there's been an increase in attacks of people doing that phishing, doing that, trying to find out how easy it is to get into places, all that preparatory work. The second type of cyber attack is what they call cyber offensive, and it's just to prove that you can. So that you then put your target on notice that, oh, okay, they've done this. What else can they do? Then you get to the full military, which is you cripple the infrastructure. You target the things that make a society work. But it also, this is the thing about not crossing red lines, it helps keep it within bizarrely international law and international treaties, because you're not, the damage is proportionate. You're not going in targeting civilians. You're doing very targeted damage. So in a way, it almost gets over some of the issues that have been put against Russia. But and so if you target healthcare, the supply chain, transport, that's really going to unsettle the population. And
of course, that is where the hard data is out there, the patient data, the patient information. The PAA data are quite hard, and that has a lot of value in the black market. So there's a reason they go behind that.
He does, but then this expert I was listening to had a very scary thought, which is something that I hadn't thought of. There was a concept. So apparently, the first cyber attack was 2011 or something, or the first type of this type of cyber warfare type attack. And since then, they've had a phrase called Cyber Pearl Harbor. And so back in 1941, the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor was so severe that it forced America into the Second World War.
Yeah, it does.
So with the cyber Pearl Harbor, you could do so much physical damage and loss of life, because if you target and you can blow up a nuclear power station or something by fiddling with the control systems.
When you speak about the physical damage, the Iranian Stuxnet worm attack on Iran's nuclear power plant is one thing that we should talk about as well, because that was like targeting the nuclear power reactors, and the Stuxnet worm that was deployed using a USB, flawed USB device that could have done a lot of more damage. When you speak about the cyber Pearl Harbor thing here, that is also one thing to consider.
Yeah, and the point here with the cyber Pearl Harbor is that instead of sending planes to attack, a Navy port, you do this damage, and therefore your target then retaliates. So therefore, the original aggressor, the one that launched the cyber attack, can then go, "Hey, I'm only defending myself because they attacked me." because there's still, and maybe this will change in the future. When somebody defends themselves against a military attack, that's acceptable. That's defending yourself. But there seems to be a difference if you're defending yourself because of damage that a cyber attack has done. Then you're going in to do a normal military response. In relation to that, then that means the original aggressor is going, "Hey, they attacked me. They invaded my country." So I think that's a potentially very scary scenario that we should do our best to avoid getting into.
Indeed, it is. So,
but back in the Second World War, there was you had disinformation, you had propaganda, and that carries on. It's just that so propaganda was a kind of a soft weapon because there wasn't the ability to do cyber type attacks, and so you had famously in Britain there was a person that was called Lord Haw who broadcast lies from Germany into Britain during the Second World War, and he was a British, might have been Irish person. I think he was hung for treason when the British got hold of him eventually at the end of the war. But he was there to just destabilize the population. So even though it was quite nasty, unpleasant, and it made people upset, it didn't do damage. So now we've got to this stage where we have these cyber things. The cyber arsenal is helping is damaging people and making them unsettled in the same way that propaganda did, but it also has the ability to do real damage. However, we also have propaganda coming in, so the technology is appearing. The same technology that's being used for just straightforward attacks is being used for things like deep fakes, and as well as propaganda, and just the simple thing of publishing just saying, no, they're actors, they haven't been injured, they're just actors, so we're still using the old propaganda tools, and people just showing video from 10 years ago. It's nothing to do with what's happening on the ground. But we've got another level. It seems to be that even though all these things are supposed to kind of protect the population from the worst impacts of a military offensive, we're unsettling them in other ways, whether it's through these attacks that make you go, "I can't trust the train, I can't when is our electricity going to blow up or be cut off?" But you're also getting that the mental kind of torture of having the propaganda and having people lie to you or making you doubt that you're yourself. So it's kind of all these things are bundled together in a kind of a cyber war kit. Some are offensive, some are kind of
U.S. presidential election of 2016 is one of those propaganda of campaigns that is done by the Cambridge Analytica, which is supposed to be having backlinks to the Russian Federation. So that was one huge fake propaganda that pushed, that has been proved to be like a propaganda towards the ex-US President Donald Trump's reign last election.
Right. Okay. Yeah. But it's, we can clearly at this moment in time, we can point our fingers at, at an obvious aggressor. But yeah, there are, as other countries, and North Korea, a poor country that it doesn't have much capacity, despite what they say. It's just tested a missile in the last day or so, another one. But cyber is apparently is a big source of foreign income for them because of sanctions. They can't earn income from many places. So cyber is not just an attack; it's also facilitating some of these regimes that maybe also potentially could launch attacks in the future. But it's interesting. Just if you boil it all back down to the message we keep saying to our customers is that it's not a question of when you get attacked; it's of if you get attacked. It's when you get attacked. So you have got to be prepared. And there are vulnerabilities out there that people know about, and if the good guys know about them, the bad guys know about them probably sooner, and they're working to exploit them. So whether it's in times of war or times of peace, you still need to make sure you have that protection in place. But as Joe Biden was saying, these days, this particular time we're living through, the stakes are much higher because it's not just commercial damage to one organization, it could be potential massive disruption to the whole country in a coordinated attack. But it boils down to, in this case, you can't expect the state to protect you. They can do something. They can tell you what's happening. They can monitor what's happening. But it's now, unlike other war type situations, it's down to individual action. So you have to make sure that you have to invest to make sure that you've got those safeguards in place to protect you and by default protect the whole country. So yeah, it's not something we particularly want to be talking about, but it's worthwhile because it does actually just add that different perspective to our standard cybersecurity, cyber protection message.
So when you speak about the cyber attacks happening between the countries that is involved in the cyber warfare, we need to speak about US, China, US, Russia. And also one more thing is the third parties that come into this, the thing of cyber warfare, the anonymous hackers who are currently exploiting Russian, most of the Russian organizations. They took down, multiple media houses. They started broadcasting Ukraine war videos to the citizens of Russia. And they also did something with Putin's luxury yacht. And they made a lot of alterations. They changed the name of the yacht to something that is not very convincing to say. And they also made the yacht to be, there is a navigation app that can see the maritime location of a particular boat or ship or yacht. So they changed the location of the Putin's yacht to hell. So when somebody goes and looks out for where the yacht is, it will be showing it is in the hell. So they do a lot of this kinky things out there, and including, the NB65 hackers who went ahead and pledged the allegiance to Ukraine, and several other hacker entities that are in support of Ukraine and taking down Russian organizations. Similarly, there are organizations, there are entities, hacker entities that is supporting Russia, and they are doing attacks on US. For example, Conti ransomware groups are the one guys that they went ahead and said it out loud that they are in support of Russia here, and they will do anything and against the hacker that is working with the Ukrainians. So Ukraine also recruited some IT guys for the IT army of Ukraine, but later they went ahead and faced I think Ukraine's defense ministry and the armed forces were also breached recently by the Russian hacking groups. I'm not sure whether they are state-sponsored or the independent entities working in favor of Russia, but they took down several organizations in Ukraine using multiple payloads. One of those including Isaac Viper and Hermetic Viper, which are like the sabotages, which are only focused of destabilizing and sabotaging the entire environment or the network of the organizations, and not interested in any monetary benefits.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it's interesting that we're talking about Russian attacks, cyber attacks, whereas it's only a few weeks ago that they closed down Revel in Russia, and which was an admission that these people were working in Russia. So it seems to have been almost a complete change, that from saying there's no hacking going on in Russia to there is, to fairly open cyber attacks, which is it is indeed very strange times that we're living through.
Yeah, that's happening a lot, and the payloads that they launch, that most of the payloads do not activate immediately. They stay dormant in the environment, and they get this command from the command and control center of the particular entities, and they start becoming more active whenever they guys need it to be. So maybe I have seen Russia launching attacks on Ukraine long before the Russian invasion on Ukraine. So this has been there. The plan was there, and it's happening for a long time now. Only thing is there isn't any assurance whether these guys that are working for Russia, or whether state-sponsored or independent entities that are supporting the invasion right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm sure we haven't seen or heard the last of this yet. But so I think we've got that fairly covered for now. But we'll keep our eyes on this space, and we'll certainly see what the future brings, which at this moment might not be too much of an optimistic thought, but we'll live in hope. And
yeah, I hope they don't take it to space, because I read a news where the NB65 hackers even compromised Russian space agency's control center. So the war could be more than just on the Earth, and it could go to space as well if this is going to happen, and people are capable of it.
Yes, and of course the US did launch their Space Force as a branch of the military.
Yeah, there's a lot of political agenda behind. I think there is a new space-oriented combined campaign that's going on with Russia and US and other countries involved. I think it's for the better internet service out there. And I don't remember the name of the operation, but I think Russia is launching those satellites into the space, and the political agenda behind it had some implications after the recent acts of Russia on Ukraine.
Ah, right. Oh, yeah. Because yes, if you can control internet connectivity, which, as we're seeing with services being cut off in various countries,
most of the countries.
Yeah, which is why the BBC World Service has gone back to shortwave radio, because that they used during the war to get things into occupied countries, to get news and information. That's what they're resorting back to, because that is not as hard to get. It was very poor reception, but you could get through, and it was difficult to block. You had to block it locally, whereas the internet you can just switch off globally, kind of very easily. So we're going back to the old ways of doing things to try and counter some of the ways that people are trying to control the narrative themselves.
Yes, which is why the cloud, being on the cloud, could be could be having some advantage and disadvantage as well. So when those things were on premise, when the softwares and the servers on the premise, people had more hold of it. And since the cloud came up, it's both risky as well as there is a lot of pros to it. But we may not know what is going to happen when the hackers are able to compromise the servers on the cloud, and which will have a lot of implications for the users of those particular cloud products. There are both pros and cons for it.
Yes, that's again that's something else we don't want to think about too much. But it's hopefully there are people way cleverer than me that are thinking about these things and ways to protect us all.
I hope so. So, Andy, what do you think? Will there be any best practices for us to look at this cyber warfare, which is could be exclusively, different from the usual practice that we do for the organizations?
Well, again, it's the best practice for cyber warfare is best practice for against cyber attacks. It is best practice. I mean, the best practice is it all boils down to the same thing. It's just there's a different reason for the attack, purely criminal or purely military or any combination of the two. But it still boils down to that individual organization putting the budget, setting aside the budget to protect themselves properly. And, because it just takes, we saw last year the Colonial Pipeline being shut down, that caused fuel shortages on the East Coast for several days. I think and so it's just, if there's, and that was an unused password account, an unused account that was still live and had access to shut the system down. Simple things that shouldn't be there, and all it takes is for a few of those to happen, a few people to go, oh, we're not going to be a target, we're not a problem, and then that will just then multiply and become more of a problem. So it is just reinforcing, I think, the individual message to every organization that you will be a target. The difference is we don't know why you'll be a target. If you are in healthcare, if you are in transportation, you're in fuel or even supply chain, you're likely to be an attack from a kind of a foreign power that maybe wants to destabilize the country. If you're a shop, it could just be more of a criminal, but it's still the same protection you can give to yourself, whatever the reason why you're being attacked.
Sure. I also believe that this has to be done in from the federal side, from the state governments or the central governments, whoever are responsible for taking care of the particular entities, they need to push the hard frameworks, protocols, procedures, and they need to ensure that they're not just dictating those things to be done. They need to also make sure those things are in place, and the maintenance and the regular monitoring of those things has to be made by the responsible bodies. In case of US, let's say FBI, CSI, and the Treasury Board of US is also working together to find some right protocols, procedures to be dictated to to be proposed and dictated to the responsible industries, and need to take the right actions for them to abide with the rules and procedures to keep proper cybersecurity practices in place.
Yeah, exactly. We are seeing federal agencies in the US making recommendations, putting things in place, maybe making funds available. But then the next level is getting people to actually follow them, not cut corners, do what they're told. And I think that's what some of the frustration is in the Biden administration at the moment, is that some people just aren't listening to the warnings, because they have the intelligence, they can warn what's happening, but a warning isn't any use unless you act on it and do something proactive to stop that warning come true.
I think the laws like the GDPR, the CCPA, and multiple other data privacy laws are pushed into force. But I think US is just to receive one at the country level. There are a few laws for the state level. I think New York has one on the data privacy, and only strong laws could enforce that, and the penalties. Which is why the GDPR is a big thing, and I think US organizations are paying decent penalties for the European Union.
That's true. But the CCPA is California.
Yeah.
But the advantage of, for example, CCPA, as we veer off topic, is that it's more modern. The GDPR took so long to get through Europe. It took 5-6 years or something, and was a year late going into effect. That technology changed, and so I from my understanding, I used to have my own personal copy of the GDPR and the CCPA. I didn't get invited to a lot of parties, but and so I believe, if I'm correct in thinking, that CCPA explicitly mentions things like cookies,
Yes.
and it actually mentions that technology, whereas GDPR is all about the access, your rights as an individual, the European perspective on other people getting hold of your right. Whereas that's less of an issue in America. I think in CCPA you have to have a button that says "Do not sell my data." So it's not it's slightly different thing. From a company's point of view, it's similar type of legislation, but it's more modern and actually more aware of the current of the modern technology that people like myself deploy to help get our marketing message across.
And there is also this the spyware software that they mentioned that's around in the internet called Pegasus. I think it's used by multiple countries to spy on the counterparts there. So I'm not sure about the software or the genuinity of the information up there, but Pegasus software seems to be a spyware that is being deployed at targeted devices to monitor things on the other side of the world.
Yes. So they targeted, didn't they? They targeted Angela Merkel and a lot of German members of the government. And as you see every so often, you'll hear stories that they were targeted. Certain people you wouldn't expect were targeted by someone else who was supposedly a friend. But yeah, that's okay. That's yeah. Yeah, that's. But at least we're not important enough to be targeted by Pegasus.
Great.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks for being on the show, Andy. It was a great pleasure talking to you about the cyber warfare.
Yeah, it was good. It was good talking to you as well. I think we covered a lot of ground. Some of it scary, but certainly something should make everybody think.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Andy.
Okay,
so let's catch up next episode.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Hi, guys. Bye-bye.